I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And I'm JT Timmons.
And today we have another top 5 list for you.
Top 5.
Yeah, since y'all ate that one up the last time we did it. It was a really good episode, for talking about all the spooky places you can stay. And so we decided to do another one. And this is going to be the top 5 hauntings that are still currently active in the U.S.
Yes.
So
we're saying in the U.S. because we're going to do one that's outside of the U.S. too.
Yeah.
We're going to do like a world haunting.
Yeah, we might do Europe. We might do Asia. We might do Australia, since we have a lot of
probably do us well to break it into smaller chunks, because choosing a top 5 internationally is very difficult.
Yeah, picking we'll do the different continents. Let's go for that later on. But
Antarctica is going to be weird.
Real fast.
Yes.
Top 5 of Antarctica.
Polar bear.
Polar bear, the ice monster. So let's see. I have good news for all of you who are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere where you get your podcasts and not watching. We have a bat now. It's a neon bat behind Madison and Patrick for all the YouTube viewers.
It's Patrick the bat next to Chris,
person.
I'm Chris. I've only been here for a year.
Sorry, did I call him Patrick?
You did. You called him.
That's how. We have a guy named Patrick. That's part of our. Anyway, it's a whole thing. So we asked the Parajunkies what the bat should be named, and let's see, Melissa, Parajunkie Melissa said Batrick. And Batrick, everyone immediately in the comments agreed in the live stream, in the Parajunkie only live stream, that Batrick is the winner.
I agree.
It is unanimous.
Batrick.
We have Batrick as part of our studio.
Batrick in the back.
Yes. Patrick behind us.
Yes.
All right. So, Maddie, we just have a couple quick, super duper quick announcements, and we will get started with the episode.
Yep. So first off, for anybody who is not a Parajunkie, the pilot episode of our radio play that we've been talking about, Beneath the Cobblestones, is going to come out for you guys on October 6th. So you get to start out your spooky month, the first Friday of the month, with the radio play. It's really fun.
It's a pilot episode of it.
It is. So it's really fun, and Chris and I are both in it. So you'll get to hear our voices in a different capacity.
Yes.
We're actors.
We're actors.
Performers.
Although it's strangely based upon us, so
it is strangely based upon y'all.
That different.
Yes.
They are heightened versions of ourselves, basically.
Yes.
But anywho, and then if you're a Parajunkie, you've already heard the pilot episode, of course, and so you will be getting the second episode.
Wait, drum roll.
The week of October 8th. Woohoo! Yes. So you will be getting the second episode. So if you want to hear the pilot episode before October 6th, go become a Parajunkie. It's already up there for them. And then you will immediately be able to pretty much get the second episode as well. So
yes, we actually record it this Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So that's super exciting. You're not going to want to miss that for sure. And then also the $20 tier Parajunkies are going to be getting a nice spooky surprise from us.
Yes.
Exclusive merchandise that you can only get if you are that level of Parajunkie, so the ultra Parajunkies, if you will, and we are going to be shipping those out soon. And then last but not least, for the entire month of October, Chris and I and Eni are going to be doing a thing we like to call Tuesday Terrors.
Boogity boogity.
Yes, Chris, do you want to explain to them what Tuesday Terrors are kind of going to be?
So basically, every Tuesday night in October, we're going to be hosting special event at King Oliver's Creole Jazz Bar, which is a pizza joint that just opened up on MLK here in Savannah, Georgia. And we're going to be doing ghost stories and ghost hunting demonstrations and Q&As, and there will be pizza.
Pizza.
So,
there will be pizza. Who doesn't like pizza?
Pizza and ghosts. Spooky pizza ghosts.
And also, I believe that investigation might be Parajunkie only, but we did investigate King Oliver's in their coffee shop behind that's attached to it. Basically, it's the same people. Agatha's, we did an investigation couple months ago, and so if you want to see us investigate that before you come to see Tuesday Terrors, I know for sure it's on our Patreon. So.
Yes, and the workers at the location, they have lots of ghost stories about events that have been happening pretty frequently ever since they started renovating the place. So there's a lot of really good haunted vibes at the location. So you come have pizza at a haunted location and listen to ghost stories.
And on Halloween, there is going to be a haunted pizza party.
Yeah,
which is going to be super awesome.
It's going to be a costume party with prizes, and there will be trivia with prizes.
So
prizes.
So if you like prizes and you want to go somewhere in your costume,
and it'll be early enough so that you won't have to stay up until midnight to
exactly
party. Or if you have plans at midnight, you can come to us first.
Yes, exactly. So we'll have a link for that soon, and it'll be in our description as well. So
also, Chris is wearing merch.
I am wearing some merch.
He's wearing merch.
We have merch on our website, hauntedcitypodcast.com, if you want to, hit that one up. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the top 5. It is definitely no surprise that our last top 5 episode is our most listened to episode of the last 2 months.
Excellent.
Yeah, which is it just
people
skyrocketed.
People enjoy a good list. I love a good list.
I love a list too.
You tell me top 5. You tell me top 10. I'm invested.
Yes.
Yeah. We are now going to be converting, I guess, into a Watch Mojo type style.
Well, it's going to be one of those segments because it proved to work. So why not, right?
I know. Tis a joke. No, you'll still get to hear us blather on. But anyway, so let's start out with number 5.
Number 5.
Number 5.
So number 5 is the Sorrel Weed House.
Dun, dun, dun.
Probably one of the most active haunted houses in Savannah.
Oh, absolutely.
In general. And, we like to include a Savannah place on all of these lists because, well, duh. I mean, that's like our whole thing. And
it's our whole thing.
And so when I was trying to figure out which one to include on this, I was like, that's very tricky because we have so many active hauntings in this city. But just by sheer volume of how many hauntings or how many spirits are commonly seen in the house, and also how often they catch them on photos and in videos and on security cameras and all sorts of things, it seems like a pretty good fit.
And if you put any stock into it, it is one of the most visited by haunting television shows places.
Yes.
You can see episodes of Ghost Brothers, of the original Ghost Hunters. Taps went there. The BuzzFeed guys went there. So it is so widely known as a haunted location that it garners people visiting from all over the country to have these very intriguing experiences too. I want to say that the first Halloween live ghost hunt of the Ghost Hunters was at the Sorrel Weed House. And I remember Savannah was kind of like a buzz about it because we were just catching up to what the Ghost Hunters were at that point. But it was an amazing episode, and I think that just about everybody who does go there gets really impressive evidence, personal experience too.
Absolutely.
Yep. And we have a Parajunkie. We have a Parajunkie exclusive of us being in the Sorrel Weed House alone, like an older one. So yeah, that was awesome. I remember you went there, Madison, and you came back, and I remember very specifically. I'm like, how was it? And because she took a tour just to try to get the history so she could tell the correct stories for the episode, and she goes, that place is so unbelievably haunted. I saw so many spirits in there. It was insane. It was palpable.
Well, it's funny too, because there are spirits there that aren't even associated with the Sorrell family, which is quite compelling, to say the least. There's like a little girl spirit who's my favorite. I tell her about her or talk about her on every tour I give usually, and her name is Sarah. Apparently, she's like 7 years old or so. She is not the daughter of Matilda and Francis, so which a lot of people would immediately think. But nope, she has literally no attachment to the house. She's just there.
Yeah, for a long time, people just naturally assumed the child was a family member, and that was like a common story that was folded in. But the interesting thing was many people experienced this child, and so much so that they started thinking, oh, well, this must be a child of the family. But yeah, you're right. She seems to be just a spirit that latched on, possibly hitchhiked in with
exactly
a visitor.
Yeah, and she hides under the furniture, and so the way they explain it is that she likes to play hide and seek, which I'm like, that's the worst thing you could do as a child spirit. Like, that's so creepy.
It's incredibly I was about to say, it's the best thing you do as a spirit. It's the worst thing for the living to have to deal with.
Yeah, and so she, I didn't know about Sarah until I went down there to do the tour and stuff before we filmed, and I was standing by a piece of furniture, and I looked at Audrey because I had felt what felt like a butterfly fluttery feeling, and if you've ever been touched by a spirit, that's kind of what it feels like. It's it feels like an electric tingle of sorts, if you will. And I looked at her, and I'm like, is there like something that touches people down there? And she goes, oh, that's Sarah. And I'm like, great, she has a name. And
that's another thing is, I think that, and if you go to most places, you'll find that the child Sarah ghost is kind of common. Sarah is a name that oftentimes comes up when identifying a young girl ghost. I think there are at least 3 locations that have a Sarah here in Savannah. I think the Espy House has a child named Sarah, and so you hear the name come up, and it's interesting because the question then comes: is that like something in our consciousness that just kind of needs to identify,
right?
And so we start to come up with these names, and if that has influence on things that people find in evidence, like when you're sitting there and you're trying to do a spirit box or things like that, if you're trying to formulate an answer, which is why the Estes method actually developed, was because you start to actively listen for like a girl's name or for something, and it could come through that way. So I find it interesting because I don't think there's any record of the Sarah child ghost, like connectively, like, oh, well, a block away or right here in the square, or so. I do think that that it's interesting. Sarah is a common child ghost girl name, and it's like, oh, it's almost like an identifier, like the lady in white or the lady in black or the gray woman. You get to that place where a lot of times children's names are associated that way.
So if you haven't listened to our episodes on the Sorrell Weed House, to give you a little bit of background on just a very, very brief history, and it's going to be the same way with all of these places. We'll do a deep dive into all of them, but just for the length of this video, we're just doing a brief overview. So the Sorrell Weed House is obviously located here in the historic district of Savannah, Georgia. It has been one of the longest standing houses to be associated with hauntings and paranormal in Savannah, and the house is often the top of the list for most haunted sites in Savannah to visit. So with the background, the house was built between like 1835 to 1840. And it was a house for Francis Sorrell, who was a merchant and shipper. And the house is in like a Greek Revival Regency style house. It stands out for sure. It's also the ugliest color of pumpkin orange is what they like to call. I think it looks like baby vomit, but that's just me.
It's such a terrible color, and fascinatingly enough, a lot of people complained when they painted it this color. So much so that there were people trying to put an injunction in it for the historic marker, but they actually found original paint samples from the plaster, and it's like, that is the color of the original house. They didn't, that's not, they were trying to restore the color. They weren't trying to, have this garish looking house.
Yeah.
It was a garish looking house.
Yeah. So Francis Sorrell just had bad taste in paint.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people don't realize that colored paint was a sign of affluence. In order to use colored paint on these houses, that's why you see a lot of red doors. Because red was a very expensive color. But when you see those muted colors like salmon or these orangey colors, it's because they couldn't afford to paint the whole place red because it costs so much. So they were using the tint to show that they were wealthy, to show that their house isn't just a plain white or isn't just, the natural color of whatever it is.
Exactly. So, but for like their main ghost stories, the number one story really falls into Matilda.
It does.
So Matilda, basically, how the legend goes, and there's a variety of different ways the story is told, but essentially, Matilda was very in love with Francis. Francis was unfaithful to Matilda. And the way they spun the story is that Francis and the servant Molly, who was one of Matilda's best friends, not only her servant, they had a relationship of sorts. We came to later find out that it was not a consensual relationship in any form, which was not uncommon for the times. But Matilda allegedly would walk into the room and find Molly and Francis in bed together. And the way that they made this seem was that was the breaking point for her. But there is evidence that shows that Matilda had been suffering from postpartum depression. She also had a variety of other mental health issues. But back in that time, they just referred to any type of mental health issue as the vapors. Hysteria. And so it was not ever obviously looked into, and Matilda would eventually take her own life. Now, this is where a lot of the discrepancies come in, because some people say that she jumped off of the balcony and landed into the courtyard, but at that time, that would have just been slate. Because it was not the actual courtyard that it is today. And also the balcony is not very high. So unless she fell directly on her head, that would be...
Well, even more damning is the fact that, according to records, the Sorrells did not live in the house when Matilda died. They had actually already moved out, and the house had been transferred over. But intriguingly enough, in that first Ghost Hunters Halloween special, I think that they were in Molly's quarters when they heard screams for help, and it makes that concept of her abuse like, oh, wow, that's terrifying.
And they still play that EVP still to this day, which is very interesting. And Molly also had a very sad ending because she was found hanging from the rafters of her quarters because she had a private room because she was
over the carriage house.
Yeah. Exactly. She was so beloved by the family in that way that she got special treatment and all that jazz. Still not great, but better. And so
there's a lot of speculation that she did not take her own life.
Right.
Because the classic stories seem to suggest one of, a series of sad and tragic, romance and entanglement, but it's probably much worse than we think.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, the history is muddied, and so there's only so much you can find on it. But that's, for the most part, the speculation of it.
Yeah.
But Matilda and Molly are some of the two most commonly experienced spirits in the house. But you see, people who come into the house have seen Matilda. They have seen Molly. Matilda is usually spotted in the parlor or on the balcony. And Molly is usually seen in the carriage house. And also, interestingly, in the carriage house, just that area of the property in general is just tense and depressing in general.
Yes.
But people who have depression, when they go into Molly's quarters, oftentimes they have really intense emotions come through, whether they're sensitive to spirits or not. And it's not uncommon for people to not be able to stay in that room. So I feel like with Molly especially, a lot of the what she went through is what people experience more so than an apparition. But they're not the only ones. People hear disembodied voices oftentimes. There have been a number of times where people will hear loud music coming from the house and there's nothing happening.
Extravagant parties. It was actually well known to be like the party place. As a matter of fact, the square is named Madison Square. Mm-hmm. And it was because President Madison and his wife Dolly would come to the parties thrown at the Sorrelweed.
And they were just party animals.
Oh yeah,
they were super party animals.
They threw a lot of parties.
Just insane. Party animals.
Exactly.
And the parties, they said, would be spilled out into the square.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole square would be just alive in this party that originated in the Sorrelweed house.
Yeah, and supposedly he demanded subwoofers everywhere.
That's right.
Yes.
And it was all Daft Punk.
Yes.
It was like,
he wanted them windows to rattle.
They're like, okay, drop it.
And so,
yeah.
I would also like to say that if you are, they are not anyone who is paid us to advertise them, but we can say that they are amazing. This house is super haunted, and you should definitely visit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have day and night tours, and it's just really cool history overall.
Paranormal investigations too.
They're able to find so much of its history, through the renovations that they did, and that was only 15 years ago or so. But they found drafts of Robert E. Lee's letters. They found old Revolutionary War artifacts on site. So it's a really cool place.
Yeah. Calvin, the GM, he's really cool. He actually, before we had a legitimate following, he sat down with us and let us have the entire house to ourselves when we were really small. We weren't like how we are today, to where we can, ask for that and, say we have a following and this is how we can kind of, pay you back, right? Is to, show our listeners this place. But he looked past that and he was like, no, you can just go ahead and do it. And he gave us he was the first haunted house to give us our start, like Sorrelweed House. So mad respect to that. Yeah. But anyway.
But yes, and they do a really good job of, they are constantly updating the tour with new information they find, and they try to make sure that the story is as accurate as possible. And they don't sugarcoat it, which I appreciate as a person who loves history. And when you go on a lot of ghost tours, a lot of times they'll gloss over some things just because they're unpleasant.
Well, Savannah had a long history of avoiding those ugly subjects.
Exactly. But unfortunately, it's the case, especially with this house. And so good on them for, being truthful to it. And it goes a long way in my book, at least. But anywho, so they are number 5. And if you are in Savannah, you should definitely visit that one. But number 4.
Before history is written, it's played. Before it's frozen in time, it's fought one shift at a time. Before it's etched in silver, it's carved in ice. What happens next will last forever. The Stanley Cup Final on ABC and ESPN Plus begins Saturday.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
It's going to be Bobby Mackey's Music World, which I know some of our para-junkies who are a part of the Paranormal Society of Savannah, they just went to Bobby Mackey's, actually.
Yep. Should have them on to talk about it.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, we're going to do that.
Yeah, it's a wild place, not just because it's in Wilder, Kentucky. But
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell I've been a ghost tour guide for a long time?
I know, right? Lord. Worse than me today.
Yeah.
Puns.
But yes, it is in Wilder, Kentucky, which Kentucky in general apparently is just teeming with these
Teaming with the demon.
Teaming with the demons. And so Bobby Mackey's is a nightclub that is often referred to as the most haunted nightclub in the U.S. There are tales of murder and suicide and satanic rituals and all the fun things tied to the location. And there's the legend of Joanna, who was a dancer who allegedly committed suicide there in the 1950s. And so a little bit of background on it. Before its current incarnation as a music venue, the property had a varied history, and it has been the site of a slaughterhouse, a roadhouse, and even reportedly an illegal casino. Mm-hmm. So it's always had its hands, for the most part, in rowdy crowds, which it's not unheard of or unreasonable, in my opinion, that nightclubs wouldn't be more haunted, because you're getting a lot of people that come through, some not great people oftentimes, especially in these more like rough and tough types of places. And so there's a lot of energy coming through and a lot of crazy things that I'm sure those walls have seen. So
God, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So the first portion of this would be the well, which is the basement of the building.
The ground zero.
Exactly. Which is reportedly contains an old sealed over well that is central to many of the site's ghost stories. Some believe that it was used to discard animal remains when the site was a slaughterhouse, and there are legends suggesting that it may have been used to dispose of human remains during its more tumultuous days. Which this is rumored. For our friends at the Paranormal Society, if you got any of the skinny on that, let us know if that was actually what it was used for. That's just how the story goes. But
yeah, in the next few episodes, I'm going to try to get them on. And we'll talk about Bobby Mackey's, because I've been meaning to do that for a while.
Yeah, that would be cool. Because you see this a lot with places that if they have rumors of satanic rituals, human sacrifice always comes up, which is
it's a rare thing, but when dealing with underground and criminal organizations, the idea of having to dispose of a body is a more common thing. So if you're thinking that you're running illegal gambling, if you think you're doing some kind of organized criminal activity, having a well that
at your disposal,
right? That you could just throw some things into, because I think that is probably more in keeping with what went down, is because of criminal enterprises and the very nature of a place that was designed to dispose of body parts, of animals. It would make sense that would be the
right
end.
Place.
But since there has never been a report of them recovering like bodies from the well, it becomes more about the legend than it does about the truth of what happened there.
But if that is the truth, like where they did dispose of bodies, it would make sense why a lot of the hauntings are attached to that.
Absolutely.
Because, that's like one of the best ways you can get a ghost is,
improper use of burial of the body.
Exactly. But Pearl Bryan is another famous legend tied to Bobby Mackey's. And so in 1896, her decapitated body
That's the one that I always remember.
Oh, yeah. Was found in nearby Fort Thomas, Kentucky. 2 men were convicted and hanged for her murder. And though her body was found miles away from the nightclub, legends connect her ghost to Bobby Mackey's, primarily because her head was never found. And some tales suggest it was discarded in the aforementioned well.
Ooh.
And so, again, this is why it's like, it's all hearsay. Have you heard of anybody seeing a headless ghost at Bobby Mackey's?
So I have. And that's the whole thing, is the there's a lot of demon talk of Bob Mack. I'm sure we'll get into that in a sec. But I've known people to come up with independent stories about either, and it's interesting because I've talked about this before. I'm not afraid of headless ghosts, and I'm afraid of everything. But headless ghost just makes sense to me. It's like, how's it going to find me?
Right.
I mean, it can't bite.
I'm just going to I'm going to move over here. And,
Exactly.
But I think someone got an EVP that was like my head, and it was like, what does that mean? And they didn't know about, the Pearl story. And so it's fascinating to think about because I think the head floating around makes more sense to me than the body walking around. Right. Because the head's where all the, observation stuff goes on.
That would make the most sense, but not everything in the ghost world makes sense. But anywho, so
that's fair.
So Joanna is probably their most famous ghost. Joanna was supposedly someone who fell in love with a singer at the club, and after her pregnancy and the subsequent murder of her lover by her disapproving father, she is said to have taken her own life in the basement. And lots of people have claimed to have seen her apparition and even heard ghostly singing. I feel like this story particularly lives on because everybody loves a good ghostly love story.
Oh, yeah,
and
absolutely.
Like tortured love. And again, I don't know how truthful all of that is, if that would be the reason why.
Kind of a wonderful observation of this place and of the area when you take it into consideration, the power of folklore and the power of that. Gather around, I'll tell you a story. Let me weave you this tale, because these tales are very tightly put together. But then when you really look at them, it's like, well, I can't find the pieces that are stuck together to make this story true. However, that does not alter people's experiences.
Exactly.
People start having these experiences, and it's like, well, that's because there's a lot of people telling these stories. There's a lot of people investing their mind energy and manifesting this legend, and those legends become strong. They become what a spirit might adhere to. If a spirit is sitting there and it's some middle-aged man like in the corner going, I wish people would pay attention to me. My name's Joanne. I used to sing here, and I killed myself for my boyfriend. And people are all of a sudden paying attention to that spirit. That becomes more than enough motive for a spirit to inhabit these things. And we keep coming up with story after story of people encountering things, and we're like, well, we know it's patently not true. Slender Man does not exist. But people do have these experiences, and people do have these things. And it's like, well, what's happening? It's because there is enough draw and enough belief and enough people focusing on it that, those, low energy spirits that don't have any source of, attention are like, oh, I'll be Slender Man. I don't mind. I'll just wipe my face off and freak you out.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing is like, because a lot of these hauntings could be a variety of different spirits, like a singing spirit in a former and still currently nightclub.
Right.
Not
absolutely.
unheard of.
And just residually.
Right.
Music absorbing into a property and then being heard later. That is, certainly possible.
So, not going to say that Joanna's not there, but I just don't know how this, just because I couldn't find any factual
that's just
bits,
We've all heard the story, but when you start to really dig, you're like, oh, it's just a story, but it probably came from somewhere.
Exactly.
Or probably rooted somewhere. And for all we know, it happened at another location and just found its way to Bobby Mackey.
Exactly. But it's a great story.
It's
regardless.
a good story. And people love it. People love a good, forlorn lover. I mean,
exactly.
we have one at the 1790, and we have a hard time verifying that story. Because, again, we have a lot of people throwing themselves to the deaths in Savannah from heights that would not kill you.
Right.
I'm
well,
sorry.
Head first, 16
yeah, you have to land on your face and then your butt.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the only way you're going to die from the height in question. We were talking, not even really a true 2-story jump.
Yeah.
May not even break a bone.
Yeah, you got a swan dive, right?
Yeah, swan dive.
It's. But any Parajunkies on the live, if y'all have been to any of these places, let us know.
Yes.
Chime in.
Yeah,
Chime
please
in.
chime in and tell your story. I'll read the comment.
Yep. And so some other experiences that people have had there over the years include staff, and this is from staff, patrons, paranormal investigators. People have been physically attacked, such as being scratched and pushed. I know you like that, JT.
Yes, I do.
And they love saying it's a demon, but more than likely, what I usually tell people, because it's not very common for a demon to just be hanging out in a place like that. A lot of times what it is these investigators, and I'm not going to name any names, but these investigators come in and they act a fool and they yell and they act insane. And imagine, because they did the same thing with the Sorrel Weed House, and they tried to claim there was a demon down there, and there is not. And so, sorry to ruin that for anybody who wanted to believe that. There's not. And so, oftentimes they'll go down there, but imagine if somebody walked into your home and started calling you out and getting really aggressive and being ridiculous. You would want to punch them too. You know, it's like...
Well, and also to keep in mind, especially in the cases of people who constantly find these aggressive spirits, it's very likely that the aggressive spirit is actually attached to the person and not the place. People are far more likely to be haunted than houses. People are far more likely to be drawing energy and having spirits crowd them in. And if you get an aggressive spirit attached to you, it will lash out. It will do these things. So if you go to a place that has a high charge, enough energy for that spirit to come through, you know, you start to ask yourself these questions. It's like, if you show up in a place that you've never been, that you have no attachment to, and all of a sudden you hear your name being called or it comes through, it's probably more likely that there's a spirit attached to you. You know, if it behaves the same way, if it always pushes you in a certain way when you're going up and down stairs, if it scratches you a certain way, and you're doing it in multiple locations, that's when you start to go, oh, you know what? Maybe it's not the place. Maybe it's the person.
Exactly. So, just saying. But anywho, obviously people see dark shadow figures, they hear music and all that jazz. But the funniest thing, and I'll leave this for this one, is the club has fully embraced their haunted reputation.
Yes, they have.
And at the entrance, they have a sign that warns patrons that the establishment is haunted and that management is not responsible for any of the actions of the resident ghosts.
There you go.
And I love that. So one day we'll make it to Bobby Mackey's and we'll tell you if there's a demon down there.
The rash of credit cards numbers that have been stolen. What's going on, ghosts?
Exactly. So moving on to the next one. So number 3 is the Whaley House in San Diego, California.
I actually knew nothing about the Whaley House before this.
Oh.
Yeah. JT is also, I know it's hard to believe nowadays, but yeah, JT's still very new to the ghostly scene. So... He's learning with y'all.
Yeah, I never watched the paranormal stuff. I was always obsessed with horror films. I never watched like the paranormal reality stuff because I grew up kind of just not like knowing that Ghost Adventures or whatever it's called was most likely a joke.
Right. We aren't naming names, but you know, it's
I don't know. They're all called Ghost Adventures to me.
They're not. But it's, you know, it's fine. Anywho, so the Whaley House was once a family residence, a granary, and a courtroom, and the Whaley House has seen its share of history and death. Several members of the Whaley family died in the house and is also said to be haunted by the spirit of Yankee Jim Robinson.
Yankee Jim.
Which is so interesting for San Diego because that sounds like something that would be in the middle of like...
Right?
You know, like
Arkansas?
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes you just got to embrace the name.
Exactly. So Yankee Jim Robinson was hanged on the property before the house was built, and visitors have reported seeing apparitions, feeling cold spots, and hearing unexplained noises. So some background. The Whaley House was built in 1857 by Thomas Whaley on land that was apparently once a cemetery. Great way to get a ghost again.
Yeah, so that's how you start.
So the house has served multiple purposes over the years, including the residence, a store, a courthouse, and a theater at one point. So Thomas Whaley and the family, the Whaleys are central figures in the home's ghostly lore. Members of the family, including Thomas, his wife Anna, and their children, are believed to still linger in the house. Visitors are reported seeing apparitions resembling the family, hearing footsteps, and smelling Anna's perfume. All not super uncommon. For hauntings, especially for residual hauntings. Residual hauntings, a lot of times it is smell, like perfume. Like if it's a really distinct perfume, you'll, get that ghostly waft, but usually it's because she probably wore it very often.
Yeah, you could do a paranormal investigation for $95 there.
Very nice. That's pretty cool.
What, $95 per person, which is not horrible. They give you all the equipment and stuff, so that's dope.
That is pretty interesting.
They claim to be America's most haunted house.
That's a bold statement.
That is a bold claim, bro.
But
wow. Okay, heard.
Anywho, so on to Yankee Jim. So before the house was built, James Yankee Jim Robinson was convicted of grand larceny and was hanged on the property.
Back when stealing things could end you at the gallows.
Exactly. And so Thomas Whaley, who witnessed the execution, still chose to buy the land and build his family home on it. He was like standing there at the execution. He's like, you know what? This is a pretty good piece of property.
Nice land.
He was like, you know what? This seems like a good place to keep my family. Let's do it. And so he did.
Maybe Yankee Jim will scare away,
exactly.
robbers.
And it's said that the ghost of Yankee Jim haunts the Whaley house, with many visitors reporting hearing his footsteps. That they believe they believe he's still walking around the house. Again, I think that might just be a fun story, and we're just attaching it to a residual haunting. But you know what? I'm not going to say I've never.
Give him the
Yankee Jim.
Give him the Yankee Jim.
It's a cool story.
It's just a fun name too.
Exactly. So they
Get back, Yankee Jim.
They also have theater ghosts.
Yes, of course.
So the second floor of the house once served as a theater, and there are reports of ghostly apparitions associated with this part of the home, and some say they've seen spectral figures of actors or heard the faint sound of a phantom audience. So that's just a bizarre thing, if you're on the second floor of a house and you just start hearing applause.
Right. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Just dusting.
There's also children's spirits, and so there are stories of Violet, who was the Whaley's youngest daughter, who took her own life in the house, and some believe her spirit is still lingering because of that. And additionally, a small red ball often appears bouncing down the hallways, which many attribute to the spirit of a child.
Well,
yeah. I mean, that would make sense. And
I'm all for that.
So did they just put a ball out? How did the ball get there? Did they, just say I wonder what would happen if we just left this here? And so
that's what we did in Washington, Georgia.
Yeah, it's pretty true.
Remember that? Yeah, we literally just left a bunch of cat balls everywhere, and we're
touch it, touch that.
Yeah,
touch it,
play with it.
And they did.
And they did. So there's also physical sensations. So people have experienced sudden cold spots, the feeling of being watched, or the sensation of unseen hands touching them. Also not very uncommon with haunted houses and things like that.
Yeah.
But yes, the Whaley house, though, does obviously have a reputation as being a haunted location, but is well known that even the U.S. Commerce Department has recognized it as being haunted, which is pretty cool. You don't usually get people who are academics, who are
or officials.
Officials that claim anything is haunted. So when you do get it, it's pretty cool. But like JT said, that you can investigate there. They have preserved the house as a museum, and so it is open for tours to the public, and they do the ghost tours as well in the investigation. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, real fast. They give you a K2 EMF meter, a Flux 2 paranormal response device, Spirit Box SB11, FLIR thermal camera, 2 dowsing rods, and a GS2 laser grid system. So you get hooked up.
No, that's pretty good. That's pretty.
That's not just here's your EMF reader. Yeah,
exactly. No, that's a really good kit.
I respect.
So, if you're in California, maybe go check it out.
Yeah.
So, number 2, taking it back to Kentucky. going to Waverly Hills Sanatorium.
Oh, yeah.
Which actually
Waverly
somebody
Hills.
on the fan base page.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, just pointed at the
Lorenzo. Lorenzo.
Oh, yes, it was Lorenzo.
Yeah, it was Lorenzo. Hold on. Let me pull up. I'll pull up his post and show it to him.
Yeah. Waverly Hills, I mean, it's just notorious at this point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. By the way, we do have a Facebook fan base page. If y'all want to join and keep up with our craziness, it's pretty chill.
Yeah, it is.
Just a heads up.
Yeah, it's mostly people posting ghostly memes and
lots of memes.
Photos and all sorts of
fun.
fun stuff.
It's called the Most Haunted City on Earth fan base, and it was started by Ashley Warner and Don Nielsen, I believe.
So, originally the sanatorium was a 2-story hospital for tuberculosis patients, and it's estimated that tens of thousands of people died there. This is in Louisville, Kentucky, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. And the reports of hauntings are numerous, from ghosts of a nurse who hung herself. For some reason, that seems to be the thorough line with all these locations, is somebody had to like themselves, but I think that just happens, anytime some places refer to as haunted, somebody always adds into the mix that somebody
took their life.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, all the way to sounds of children playing. The death tunnel or body chute, where bodies were discreetly removed from the hospital, is particularly infamous. So some background, the sanatorium was opened in 1910 to accommodate the growing number of tuberculosis patients in the region. And tuberculosis was a significant health threat in the early 20th century, and many patients came...
It still is, by the way, people.
Is it really?
Is still one of the highest killers in the world.
Yeah, well...
I thought you were meaning in the U.S. I was like, are we in the middle of an epidemic of tuberculosis
Although there is
again?
still a lot of Americans who die of tuberculosis every year.
Weird.
And we have treatments for it.
Oh, well, hopefully they aren't the same as Waverly Hills, but it was a particularly bad time in the 20th century, and many patients came to Waverly Hills in hopes of a cure. Unfortunately, many did not survive, and estimates vary, but some sources suggest that tens of thousands may have died there over the years. So the death tunnel or body chute, what everybody likes to talk about with this. This is a tunnel that stretches from the hospital to the railway tracks below, and it was initially built to transport supplies to the hospital. Just like many old hospitals like that. That's why we had the tunnels over in Forsyth to go from the funeral home over to the Chandler Hospital to the Mary Telfair Hospital. And so it was so that you could just not have to walk.
Practically the entire sewer system of downtown Savannah was formerly commerce tunnels.
Exactly.
They would just bring things from the river so they wouldn't have to hoist them up onto... because we're on a bluff. So when you get in on the river, they would take them out and they would literally put them into tunnels that went out into the downtown Savannah area. So a lot of downtown Savannah's gas lines and sewer lines, everything were actually built into the infrastructure of those old commerce tunnels.
And they also transported dead bodies
They
underneath
did move dead bodies. Yeah.
Well, because you don't want to bring a dead body out into the middle of Forsyth Park.
Hey, buddy.
So, but anyways, however, due to the high number of deaths at the facility, it was often used to discreetly move bodies out of the sanatorium to avoid demoralizing patients. Again, which is how it always goes when you have high death tolls. And that was also how the morgue tunnels ended up becoming, or in Savannah at least, how they ended up becoming just a dumping ground for bodies because they had too many of them. And they're like, where are we going to put them? Just put them in the morgue tunnels. So, anywho. Alex
Machado said at Waverly Hills, whenever someone goes on one of the ghost shows, it's so active.
Yeah,
it's very true.
I'm sure.
It's very true.
Yep.
Yeah, I would like to go visit it.
Honestly,
eventually.
we could. I was looking at the prices. Private investigations, which is 8 hours, is $1,100 in every month but October. And October, it's only $50 more than that. So $1,100, you get the whole spot for to yourself for 8 hours.
There you go.
Not bad.
Not horrible.
So. One of the rooms that is said to be the most haunted is room 502. This room is frequently cited in ghost stories connected to the sanatorium, and legend says that a nurse hanged herself in the room, and another nurse who worked in the same room supposedly jumped, or was pushed, from the balcony. Both deaths are said to have been the result of unplanned pregnancies.
Interesting.
Visitors claim to have seen apparitions and shadows or heard unexplained voices in and around this room. So, quite interesting. And also bizarre. I'd never had, before doing this research, never heard the unplanned pregnancy side of things. So, quite interesting. But many visitors also report feeling and seeing shadow figures that move quickly across walls and hallways. And the shadow people are often associated with feelings of dread or unease. There also are children's spirits, because children also died of tuberculosis during this time. So
I think that was the picture.
Yeah.
It seemed to be a small child.
Yeah, I already showed it on
Yep. And so the third and fourth floors, which once housed the children with tuberculosis, are said to be particularly active with those spirits. Visitors claim to have heard the sound of children laughing, playing, and sometimes crying. A ghostly boy with a leather ball and a girl with no eyes are among the frequently reported apparitions.
You know, I'm going to say, Chris, would you be open to going to this place?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm going to go ahead and say, if we can, let's see, if we can break by early October, if we can do over, let's see, 140 Parajunkies, we'll go.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll do it. We'll do the private one.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds like a great time to me. I've always wanted to go because I have family that lives not too far from Waverly Hills, and I just have never made it over there, but eventually.
Yeah, right now we have 124 patrons. If we can do 16 more, we will go.
Yes.
Like, for real.
Start nudging your friends.
Yes, make it happen, y'all. If
Let's
you are on the edge, let it be your pushing point. So, also, over the years, numerous people have reported a range of phenomena, from cold spots, disembodied voices, doors closing on their own, to full-bodied apparitions, like the photo that someone shared on, or that Lorenzo shared on the Facebook page. Yes, and as JT was saying, the sanatorium obviously is no longer a functioning hospital, but it now is used to host tours, and they also do the overnight paranormal investigations. So if you are on the edge of becoming a parajunkie, think about becoming one, because I would really like to go there. So.
Yeah. Also, Melanie Ellis, Parajunkie Melanie Ellis, said, when I went a month ago or so, we did get some interactions with what we believe was a child ghost playing with the balloon we put lights in. They would move the balloon on command.
That's pretty cool.
That is super cool.
And what
Melanie.
a cool concept for a tool. Yeah,
heck yeah.
Yeah,
You'd be thinking out of the box like that. That's inspiring, Melanie. Seriously.
Well, and
love
so,
that.
Especially with children's spirits, you kind of have to think out of the box with things like that, which is why the Boo Bear was created. Although I will say, if you go on Etsy, if you're just looking for a good laugh, go on Etsy and look at REM pods.
Oh, sure.
Because people
trick some out.
People make the most bizarre REM pods.
Really?
There's one that looks like Reagan from The Exorcist. Yeah, look them up. It's so funny. There's a Chucky one. There is like all sorts of stuff.
I'm doing it now.
Yeah, do it. It's
But
fun.
you know, the brilliance of a balloon is how affected it is by the slightest pressures, because oftentimes people put down a ball, and a ball is a pretty solid object. You know, the amount of energy it takes to move a ball versus trying to move a balloon
is like, boop. Yeah, we saw that when we were at the Lake Shawnee amusement park with the pinwheel. It was so easy to get that spirit to interact, even though it was broad daylight, because it's a pinwheel. I mean, it doesn't take much energy, but he was getting it going. So
these are cute.
They're fun, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, are you showing them?
Oh, I'm showing them. You can move on to the next one.
Okay, and so on to number one.
Number one.
The Sally House in Atchison, Kansas. Yes. Kansas is also a very, very haunted place.
So haunted.
Because them corn-fed ghosts, they are
Them corn-fed ghosts.
they're intense.
Well, surviving in the climate in that area, you had to be very hardy. So the spirits are hardy too.
Exactly. So the house is said to be haunted by the spirit of a little girl named Sally, who allegedly died during a botched appendix operation. Future occupants have reported being scratched, seeing apparitions, and experiencing unexplained phenomena.
Oh.
So the background, the house is located at 508 North 2nd Street and was built in the late 1800s. It's a simple 2-story brick home. So the origins of the haunting is allegedly connected to a young girl named Sally who supposedly died in the house during a failed emergency surgery on her appendix. And according to the story, Sally was brought to the house when it was occupied by a doctor with severe abdominal pain. Believing it to be a burst appendix, the doctor began surgery but made an error. Sally died from her injuries and is believed to haunt the house out of anger and confusion. So experiences, occupants and visitors of the house have reported a wide variety of paranormal occurrences, such as apparitions of a young girl believed to be Sally, as well as other spirits, objects moving or being thrown without explanation, unexplained noises, including footsteps, giggles, and whispers, and then physical attacks such as scratches appearing on individuals, especially in the case of the Pickman family who lived there in the early 1990s. The Pickmans' experiences brought significant attention to the house. Some of the other theories, though, do include there's a theory suggesting that there might be more spirits than just Sally in the house, which is what I personally believe, because it's not super common to hear children's spirits scratching people. And also, just by the way that she died, I don't foresee that as being a reasoning for her to be lashing out to people. It sounds like the attention, or even just the fact that there is a child spirit there in general, could have attracted something more negative. And
there's something terrifying of the idea that the surgery may have been so traumatic, and the nature of it could have been just feeling like an absolute attack. A lot of people, when they talk about the human sacrifice and what you're trying to get out of a human sacrifice, you're trying to lengthen the amount of time between being alive and being dead that you can actually utilize the door between the worlds to curry favor. So if it's a suffering death, that door opens and stays open for a while and things can come through. And if there's a child at the center of it, children are, so tempting for denizens of the dark because they shine so brightly. And so if a child is suffering, then they come to feed on the suffering. They come to feed on, the diminishing light. So it is possible that the very act of performing a surgery that gets botched could be, in a way, a summoning of a darker, series of spirits.
Exactly. And some believe that the spirit of an older woman, possibly connected to some ritualistic practices, also resides there. This theory stems from experiences and an EVP session that happened where they apparently picked up on an older woman. So if you want to visit this house, the house is open for tours and paranormal investigations. So if that is something you are interested in, if you live in Kansas or Nebraska or any of those general regions,
it's worth the trip.
Yeah.
I've known a lot of people who've gone.
I was just saying corn-fed regions.
those
Because you were like a corn-fed ghost.
well, they are corn-fed.
I'm done, bro. Chris
There
is
you
like,
go.
Chris
Yeah,
is like,
all
you
right.
guys are so
Sure.
silly.
There you go.
They all ate
That's
corn
solid.
out there, so therefore they are corn-fed ghosts. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
It's their number one crop.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, yeah. Okay. Technically, sure.
Oh,
All right.
boy.
I mean, anywho, so that is our top 5 list for the most active hauntings in the U.S. currently. So if you want to see us do more top 5 lists, let us know.
I could just picture our like a listener in Nebraska listen to that all like pissed off, like in their basement hiding from a tornado. Just eating
This
corn.
got worse and worse. Stop talking, JT.
Yeah.
Blue 1967 Ford pickup outside.
Oh my God. All I said was corn fed. There is a lot of corn out in that area. So
We love our Nebraska listener.
this is Kansas.
Sure.
First of all, this is Kansas, not even Nebraska. I don't know how Nebraska got pulled in. All I said is that if you live in that general vicinity, go there.
Nebraska is, right there.
The
Yeah.
Story
Top
Arts
of-
Workshop said Patrick is flagging you to stop.
Yes. Stop. Please stop.
Please stop. Please stop talking, JT.
That's so funny.
But anyways, so thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode.
Yes.
And if you are interested in becoming a Parajunkie, you can find us over on Patreon. And if we get 16 more patrons or Parajunkies, we're going to Waverly Hills. So that we can go meet all those fun ghosts.
Poke a ghost in the face.
Yeah, or I get poked in the face again.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, if you missed that one, we went.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we went live. When is this episode airing?
That was that was a live stream.
Well, I know. When is this episode airing?
Tuesday.
Okay. So when you're hearing this, it would have been just a few days ago, about 5 days ago. Basically, we did a live stream in the Old Exchange's dungeon.
The Provost Dungeon.
The Provost
In
Dungeon.
Charleston, South Carolina.
Yes, and I got poked in the eye by a ghost on camera. So
Yes.
yeah, so if you missed that, become a Parajunkie because they have access to that
They do.
indefinitely.
They get to watch live pokings.
Yeah, all the time. So, but anywho, anyways, so let's wrap this up before we say anything else. But with that, my name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Soucy.
And stay spooky, y'all.